time. I'm still waiting to hear back from her.
All right. And we're going to find out if it's working. I'm not sure it is. It's looking blank to me. Let me see. It says there's 2 viewers waiting. There's an excellent connection. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. I think we're live. Okay. So I think it's a little bit delayed, but I think that we are live. Hi folks, if you're there, it looks like we had two viewers. If you don't mind dropping in the chat and letting us know that you're there. I believe that there's some buffering happening, a kind of basic like Wi-Fi, like kind of streaming slowness, but the video itself should be working, and that would be really helpful to hear. And I'm gonna drop in the chat what I just said. Okay. And for those of you that are here, we're waiting for Sara. I'm sure she'll be here soon. What I'll also drop in the chat in the meantime are some links, first to Fracture Anthology, of course, so people can buy their copy. I believe that 100 copies were made just for today, essentially, so there's kind of like a limited run. And I can see it's still buffering. All right. And then we'll wait for Sara. Maybe in the meantime, I will just kind of double check a few different ways of viewing our video myself so I can make sure it's working. I'm wondering, Zumbambico and Joshua, do you mind introducing yourselves a bit while I do this? And that way we can also see if your audio is working.
Yeah. Yeah, you mind if I go first?
Go.
Yeah, my name is Joshua Burton. I'm a poet and educator from Houston, Texas. And we're here to discuss my first chapbook called Fracture Anthology. And we're going to be doing like a joint talk with the illustrator and the press as well.
Thank you. And Zumbambico, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm very honored to be here. My name is Ethel. I'm best known as Zumbambico. I'm an illustrator from Colombia. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here to talk about this project. I had the opportunity to make some illustrations for Joshua's Fracture Anthology. And yeah, very happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry. I was having trouble getting it on my computer, so I'm on my phone.
Oh, no worries at all. We're still trying to make sure that the live stream is working. It looks like it's buffering a bit and going a bit slowly. We have 4 concurrent viewers, and it looks like Matt is here. He said yes. There's just some buffering at the moment. Luz just said the same thing. And from what I'm seeing, it is an issue with buffering. So how about, well, a couple of quick notes then. I think that given that the buffering is an issue, I want to give some reassurance that I have it set so it also records for us. So if after we're done, if we're like, wow, like the live piece just wasn't the quality we want, the recorded version won't have any buffering. So what I'll be able to do is I'll just be like, well, we tried to go live, internet didn't get along with us on it, and the buffering was too obnoxious, and I'll just upload the recording of it. And the recording will be the same quality as the stream, so it'll have the same background, it'll have the same lower third, and everything will, like the entirety of it will remain the same. I just don't know how to make the internet play better, if that makes sense. I'm hardwired into Ethernet from my desktop, but that's in my bedroom, and I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to change devices, and I'm not sure it would make a big enough difference. So if it's all right with you all, maybe we'll just kind of proceed, and we'll know that we're also recording it. And if the live quality ends up being really a big bummer, we'll be able to let people know that it's uploaded for folks to view, and it will live in posterity. How do the rest of you feel about that?
Sounds good to me.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right. Well, Joshua just introduced himself, and so did Zumbambico. Sara, do you mind introducing yourself and Ethel?
Sure, yeah, and I'm sorry I'm a little late again. I'm Sara Lefsyk. I run Ethel Zine and Micropress, which published Joshua's book a month or a couple months ago. I can't remember. But, I started the press in 2018 and kind of has grown since then. I hand make all of the books, so it usually involves some sewing and hand binding. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, I put like a link in the chat and also put it in the description so people can buy a copy. If I understand correctly, Sara, you made like 100 copies in advance of today, so there should be about 100 available, right?
Yeah, if I run out, I'll make more, but
Okay, awesome.
there are, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I was wondering if maybe you all would be willing to start with us just kind of hearing you read some of the poems in the chapbook, right? So folks can get a sense of the poetry, and then we'll also take a look at some of the art. And I'd love to hear more about how the three of you work together to basically combine visual art with poetry, with hand making and small distribution, right? This kind of chapbook. Joshua, would you be open to start by reading us a poem?
Yeah, I can definitely start. I think there's like a little bit of feedback when we're not muted, so we might want to mute
Sounds good
when
to
up
me.
or
All right, so
talking.
we'll mute ourselves while you read.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start with a poem. It's said earlier in the book, and it was actually originally not a poem. It was actually it was like a note before the section about like the poems in my mother's voice, and I had it just as a note to kind of like give a little bit more context. I think I wanted to like over kind of defend or like explain my idea behind the process. I think I just felt like kind of anxious about it, writing in my mother's voice, and then at workshop, a professor told me to just turn the note I had into a poem because it kind of read like a poem anyway. So I ended up just later turning this into an actual poem for the collection. And this poem is called Heard, and it's in 2 sections. And yeah, just basically me trying to almost understanding and just talk about the attempt and also the, I guess, spelled attempt. I think that's inherently in personifying another person's voice about the whole process of writing the book. Heard. 1. When writing in my mother's voice, 2 pools earthed us away from one another. The horses attached to a single body, each limb pulled away, seen through to her, through a muggy decanter. I can never truly capture her voice, yet in writing her here, my hope is that the lyric will light through her, like myth through family. I cannot touch her voice, the jar of salt in my hands. 2. A man sings his story in the voice of a woman, his mother. Am I silencing her voice, closing in on myself, skeletal as I am from the start? I believe the light that guides these words comes from care. But there's a difference between picking up broken glass and knowing what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'm gonna put Sara and Zumbambico on the spot. Would either of you be willing to read one of the poems from the chapbook as well?
Sure. I don't know if you want to go first, Sara.
Oh, Sara, you gotta unmute yourself.
I'm fine either way. Do you want to go and then I can, or I can go either way?
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
If you're okay with this, yeah? Yeah, okay. I chose this poem because it's, I don't know, Joshua poems really touch me, but this one especially talks about the act of drawing. So yeah, it's called Joyce. She decides she's going to be an artist once a year. She finds the box in the garage where she placed all of her drawings of celebrities, her children, and baskets of purple fruit. But she doesn't look through them, just sets them by her bedside. She sifts through a magazine, considering what to draw next. Starts and quits 3 drawings. She finds more pictures of her children in deep browns and blacks, so deep she is lost in their color. How they are without metaphor. She leaves the woman half drawn like the lipstick ad.
Thank you so much. And Sara, will you read one as well?
Yes, I'm going to read For Her Sake. A truth becomes truth once it sustains itself. I enter and re-enter this image, a girl lying in bed, her red hair housing her pillow as the body shelters nerves. I review her body's idiosyncrasies. Her eyes are seeds pried open by an ancient tool. On the nightstand, a family of dyed flowers leans over the lip of the vase in her direction. She recognizes the sound of his feet on wooden floors outside her bedroom by habit. Did he incapacitate the house of God or just the house? I say I revisit the entrance of this gate for her sake. Is my visiting a violence as well? She sits up, silent as a cemetery. You will become your surroundings, like the schizophrenic who stays in metaphor too long. The door cracks, the black narrows, a child slowly peeling off a Band-Aid.
Thank you. I'm gonna actually kind of invert the usual set of questions. We usually ask the author questions first. I'm gonna ask Zumbambico and Sara, since you're already unmuted, we'll go ahead and jump and put you on the spot first. Why did you select that poem?
I feel like this poem sort of encompasses the whole book in a way. I really love the line, her eyes are seeds pried open by an ancient tool. It makes me think about how we're all sort of a result of sort of past like DNA of our families. It's like in us all and will be in the future. And also how he's talking about, is it okay for him to tell this story or not? But I think he grapples a lot with that in the book.
No, it's beautiful. Zumbambico, what about you?
Yeah, I chose it because, as I mentioned, it talks about how Joshua's mom is drawing, and to me it was beautiful when he told me about the journals she wrote for decades, and then she showed them to him, and then through our conversations when he told me about how she also likes to draw, and I can see that also in other poems. The reference to a doll being cut from a magazine, and then here it was very special to me just to find the craft making here, and I also got to know her at the event, Mrs. Joyce, and I don't know, I felt very connected to this poem and in a way of also honoring her. Yeah.
And then, of course, Joshua, why did you pick the poem that you selected to read?
Yeah, I felt like to start before like maybe it's like a good preparation. I think similar to like what Sara said about like the poem she chose, of like that critique or self-critique of like, oh, should I do this? Was this the right thing to do? They kind of going in circles. I think a lot of the book is like wrestling with the impulse of almost trying to almost defend or understand the desire to write in my mother's voice. And I think that poem just tries to like lead us into it. So yeah, when I read, next thing I'll probably read will probably be in her voice. So I think that just like is good preparation for that.
Actually, I'm going to jump the gun then and say, will you go ahead and read that one as well? And then I'll basically start peppering all of you with a lot of questions. But now that you've already kind of given the teaser of you're going to read one in her voice, I think I want to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. So this poem is called The Mother Hole. On our first date, he said he loved me. Don't say that to me, I said. I would later tell him, don't touch my stomach. You might harm it. Pregnant with my first, even I kept from touching it when I could. Because family must be earned. Each child fell from me like a dress. I was a whole person becoming less.
I love each child fell from me like a dress. Yeah, that just, it sticks. I'm gonna ask now if Zumbambico, will you talk a bit, if you don't mind, about how you came up with the visual art for the cover and within the book, and in particular, the ways that you started to touch on it a bit, experienced the mother's voice coming through in those paintings and in that work, right? And you don't be shy about getting into like the nitty-gritty details, like basic communication, right? That would happen between you and Joshua around it, like what you knew, what you didn't know, what kind of work already existed. Yeah.
Okay. First, we collaborated in 2020 when we were like applying for a magazine called La Tundra, and we applied with 3 poems. And then I made an illustration. We've always had this connection. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but we met at an airport, and since then we've been talking to each other from long distance and having these very deep conversations. And Joshua showed me his poems, and I, from the first moment, connected to them immediately. And those 3 poems like flowed, that shows the election of the colors that I made. It was very intuitive. I usually work with my intuition, so it just flowed. And I think I already mentioned that he already gives me a lot of creative freedom. And when we decided to make this collaboration in February 2022, actually it was this year, yeah, actually the book was gonna come out, and then we decided to add more illustrations so we could show them together during the launch of the book, the release of the book. And there was a creative freedom again. You know, we've always had like these conversations. I think it was very easy to weave everything. And reading the poems just touched me. You know, immediately I felt a lot of things. You know, there were, you know, like tears. Yeah, a lot of tears while I was reading many of them. And I also got to know Joshua and his mother, not only through the poems, but through what he shared with me during our talks. So somehow I felt very connected, and also there was like a lot of respect, you know, towards this story that he was sharing to me and to the world. And yeah, that's basically how everything started. It's digital art. I did it with my iPad. And yeah, that's if you, I don't know if you would like to know more about it. Yeah.
I'm curious in particular about, and this might be like a major stretch, so if I'm like basically laying my own interpretation onto it, then let me know. And the poem that Joshua read, right, is talking about the dress, right, like the concept of like they fell out of me like a dress and so on. And then I've noticed that the figures, and I kept calling them figures, so you can also correct me on that, but the figure with the dress and the gun kind of laying over it kept sticking with me. Like, and I noticed it the most when I was trying to write the alt text, actually. So I was trying to write the alt text for the book cover. And then Sarah, I'd be curious about like your kind of interpretation or thoughts on this as well, since you worked very like tactilely, I guess, with it. But the way that the gun is kind of stitched across the middle of this kind of bell-shaped dress, and that to me was the hardest part to describe when I was thinking about the alt text. I also noticed that like later in the book, she's sort of unclothed and the dress disappears. And it might be, I know that for myself, at least when I'm doing a lot of my creative work, I'm not necessarily thinking conscientiously about those kinds of choices. So feel free to kind of project backwards onto it. But I'm wondering kind of like how you made those choices around the clothing. And then Sarah, you might jump in at that point too, if you're open to it, and talk about how you figured what you would stitch, like why the line across the gun, across the dress, and just kind of, yeah, like I don't know how to explain it, but my brain keeps hiccuping on it, which I think is a good thing. Like it keeps kind of stammering, trying to like figure out a way to describe it and think through it. So I'm curious about that.
Do you want to go first, Sarah?
I had to unmute. Well, so originally I had, gotten the illustration for the cover, and I did just some random stitching. I knew we wanted to have some stitching. I think I did like around the dress, and I did somewhere else, and I sent it, and to get feedback, and they had requested that maybe we take out a couple of the other stitches I did and add the line through the gun, and then so that's what it ended up being. So for me, it was more just getting feedback with what they felt was right for the cover design. Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, like, your question is about how she has a dress, and then in the other illustration she has no dress. Actually, I've never thought about that before. Like, it was not conscious at all. This is more, I think I related this poem specifically to an image she was also like making, right? Like the dress herself, but also like an image she was like creating with her craft. And then I usually work with a lot of naked images, and to me it was important, especially in this illustration where she talks about her brother, and in this poem, to my older brother, I forgive you. Portraying her naked was like also freeing her, because it's to me this poem made me cry, and it was a poem of a lot of release. And having her naked, in this I did it on purpose, but in the other 9 illustrations, or 8, it was more like intuitive act. And also, like, I love drawing naked women because in my opinion it talks a lot about freedom. So I guess that's the reason for that. Yeah.
To my older brother, I forgive you, on page 38, right? Joshua,
Yeah.
do you want to read it, or can I read it, or can someone else read it? It's up to you. I'm gonna let you.
You
Dealer's
can,
choice.
if you want to read it, it'd be nice to hear you read it. Yeah, will you be okay reading it?
Because to me, like, it sounds like Zumbambico, if I heard you correctly, this one made you cry, and that was partly why, like, you wanted to kind of do this visual response for this one in particular. All right.
Why did I do this illustration? Sorry.
You
For
said
this
that
one?
this particular poem in the collection also made you cry, like the impact of it. So I'll try to read it with great feeling. I'll do my best.
Okay.
All right. To my older brother, I forgive you. Not to unshackle you, but to relocate the power. The hour where my little girl gashes are barred shut and clamped. My wings have grown too fierce, unyielding. Now I am a siren eclipsing 3 children, fluttering with the gleam of a diadem. Luna-like, loving each queer shadow I cast, I forgive you, only so that what you've sown doesn't scatter. Now you, gorging on mud near the crest of the plume by my feet, and my gorgeous wings spread like the mouth of a carnivora. Joshua, you are a fantastic poet. It's a gorgeous poem. Instead of putting all the pressure on you all, I'm going to name some things that for me are like really stunning about this poem and how I love the illustration next to it. There's obvious things, right? So folks, get your own copy so you can read it and look at it yourself. Right, but there's some obvious echoing with the wings and the ground kind of rising up, and I feel like there's this kind of being pulled by and pulling back at the same time with the string, and we have the moon casting over. But for me, what stands out in the poem is the way that these phrases, like, not to unshackle you, period, but to relocate the power, period. Right, so when folks are reading it, the one line is broken up with the period right in the middle, and it's technically 2 phrases, but the period for me ends up reenacting that sort of assertion of relocating the power, right? Like the way it ends in the middle of the line, even though it's after a phrase, is kind of like a relocation of the power on a sentence level, to me at least, right? And the way you kind of are forced to take a breath to say but is also kind of a moment of relocating it. And then the way the first line ends on a period kind of makes me take a full stop for a moment, right? And then the next line kind of spills out more until clamped on the 3rd line, and there's a period. So I feel like something for me that like really strikes me out this poem, and I'm grateful you let me read it, Joshua, is I love how the punctuation is doing so much work to make us feel that sense of push and pull with power, right? Like, and I see it in the illustration, like the way there's this red root in the ground and this kind of threading that the woman's holding, but at the same time that she's looking upward, and there's to me a face of some joy, and there's also wings. So we've got like roots and wings. There's like a sewing down and a lifting up toward the moon with the arrows pointing up. And there's something about the tension of the punctuation kind of pushing and pulling us so that we're relocated with the speaker along with the visual piece right next to it, that for me captures some of the things I love most about poetry and visual art collaboration, where like you can kind of get this full-bodied sense of being pulled in multiple places at once. And I think it's just really gorgeous. I was really excited you pointed to this, Zumbambico, because this is actually my favorite part in the whole book. And like it's my favorite illustration and my favorite poem together. And I think that they function together that way, right? In some ways, the way that the figure in the visual art is kind of like angelicized almost, or made kind of angelic, is also at war a bit, I think, with like the kind of hard punctuations and moments of stopping and going and stopping and going of the poem. And I was also reading the 3 red kind of like shadows almost on this. It's funny, but writing alt text, meaning like for those that don't know what alt text is, reading the description you have to write of an image on the website so that folks who aren't using their vision to go through an image can hear or read what the image is. It's forced me to look more carefully. And I'm like, and I was looking at the cover and I was looking at this image. I'm like, how would I describe those 3 prongs? It's like, on the one hand, I'm like, it's almost like 3 more breasts, but it's also like 3 profiles. Like it's almost like these other faces kind of being pulled out. And on the cover, I read it as like 2 other profiles and maybe a 3rd emerging from her hips. Yeah, is that intentional? I was so nervous when I wrote the alt text because I'm like, ooh, like I don't know if I have this right or not.
No, I love the interpretations you make, because actually you're making connections that I think neither Joshua or I thought about before. But yeah, the three images here, this is Joshua, his sister, and his brother. And that's his mom, carrying them. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And well, here it's like, to me, she through the whole book, she's sharing her story, but she's also like, there's a huge statement here, at least how I got it as a reader, of releasing and healing and power, and to me, she's here like, it's like an audience of people, like just, she's there, like standing strong. So to me, it was important, and I also work a lot with profiles. So there's a lot through the images that you can see.
Yeah. I love that, because when I was trying to figure out, I kind of got lucky that like Instagram forced me to crop the cover, because I was like, and I'd already drafted the alt text, and I was trying to figure out how to describe, like I kind of thinking like the Red Sea at her feet, kind of, but I was like, they look like faces that are kind of emerging, and they look like water at the same time. And there is a strength to it. Yeah. Sara, I have a question for you as someone who kind of worked with both of them to figure out probably the exact order, like where would the visual art appear? How would you decide what to stitch? And what kind of like, I guess I'm just curious, because I'm not someone who does stuff with my hands a lot for a variety of reasons. And I'm not crafty. I have some hand problems. But I love visual art, and I've been practicing it now. Actually, I have a new project where I've been practicing it, so I'm a little obsessive. But the stitching part, like the book arts piece to it, is very new to me. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about how you, like what decisions you had to make